Chapter 4: The Historical Context and Marxist Roots of Woke Ideology. The next idea to make a better world absent an affirmation of God and faith, that naturally and inevitably resulted in tyranny and mass death, was Marxism-Leninism. This plague is much more accessible for contemporary champions of peace and freedom in America and worldwide. Marxism, its gulags, and mass death happened in our own lifetimes. Marxism is openly and militantly atheistic, not accidentally atheistic, as happened in the Enlightenment. Marxist positions are overt and enforced. It openly hates God and religion and brutally forces the closure of faith inside its borders. It openly rejects private property as immoral and an evil, unlike the collateral positions that came along with the inventions and fantasies of a troubled French philosopher. The animating DNA of violence and conflict innate to Marx's dialectic slowly dawned on pro-freedom thinkers who witnessed directly that totalitarianism and genocide intensified through the application of Marxism. Finally, the context for these two non- or anti-God revolutions, rationalism and Marxism, are very different. The liberation efforts of the Enlightenment and the French Revolution happened against the backdrop of oppressive despotism that characterized life in the late Middle Ages. At the time of the Enlightenment, Europeans were ravaged under the unholy marriage of profligate royalty and corrupt and abusive clergy. This is one of the reasons why the Enlightenment is often taught as positive. It was a big part of needed change. The global and historical context around Marxism, however, was completely different. It was not like the French Revolution, which had only the Ancien Régime as the other option. Marxism had to present itself against societies that were prospering, where people rose in class and stature, where citizens were free and ever more equal. It is easy to miss the dark and the subtle shifts away from God present in rationalism. Nothing seemed off about wanting a government based on reason, especially in a time when clergy and religious authority were corrupt. With Marxists, on the other hand, rejection of God and faith is a known and an open part of the ideology. Marxist believers must deliberately embrace and commit to a worldview defined by violent revolution. Because we have lived through a century of violent and militant assault on the American ideals of faith, freedom, equality, private ownership, and free markets, the nature of Marxism is more immediately known. Champions on the right should know the philosophy, and just why Marxism is atheist and violent by nature. But because the global communist revolution has already shown this, there is less by way of argument needed to show the inevitable misery that this God-denying philosophy yields. What is more important to learn now is about the adjustments made by communist loyalists post-Stalin after communism showed itself clearly as history's single greatest producer of human misery and death. To date, the only widely known efforts to dispel the allure of communism was in the sphere of economics. Free market economists proved socialism to be the path to poverty and social collapse. But the deeper part of Marx's errors were not addressed. This is a failure of the West. Marxism was not only a failed economic theory, it was a total worldview, a metaphysics, a theory of history, of life, and of the world. Unfortunately, the defeat of communism was essentially economic. Reagan's wealthier America collapsed the Soviet Union economically and, by extension, militarily. But much of the other elements of Marxism remained untouched, and determined loyalists designed and implemented strategies to successfully retain and modernize Marxist philosophy in the effort to invade and destroy Western societies from within. The most important part of Marxism was never sufficiently analyzed and attacked. That most important part, just as it was with Descartes and the Cogito, is the rejection of God and faith as the basis for society and culture, and for a promising human life and society. This time the replacement was with materialism rather than rationalism and humanism. The Marxist form of rejecting God is far more detrimental to human dignity and valuing human life. In the end, the materialist-based view of the world and human life produced a death count 3,000 times greater than that of Robespierre and the Reign of Terror. The base ontology of conflict and violence in the dialectic and the foundational replacement of God with matter were not met by Western scholars. The focus was on economy and military superiority. Even though the U.S. and other free societies were able to resist and defeat communism through America's economic growth, and military ingenuity, the deep philosophical flaws were never exposed and overcome such that communism and anti-Americanism stopped being taught. Had Marxism been defeated, it would be an embarrassment for intelligent people to be known as believing such a thing. This necessity to not leave dark and violent ideologies intact is one of the important underlying purposes of WIC education. This ends Chapter 4.